All right. Awesome. Well, we'll get started.
Good morning. I'm Jamie Hansard and co-chair of the ApplyTexas Advisory Committee, along with Dr. Mordecai Brownlee, who also serves as a co-chair to this committee. It is May 12th and the time is 8:33 a.m. and I'd like to call the ApplyTexas Advisory Committee meeting to order. This meeting is being held via Zoom. Please be aware that although we are meeting via Zoom, this meeting is still being broadcast via the internet as an open meeting. We'll now take roll call of committee members to confirm a quorum is present to conduct this meeting. As I state your name, please say here. Paula Arredondo.
Here.
Mordecai Brownlee.
Here.
Indra Pelez.
Here.
Kevin Davis.
Here.
Leah Hickman.
Here.
Dara Newton.
Here.
Angie Taylor.
Here.
Miguel Washleski.
Here.
Scott Bennett.
Here.
Chantel Blake.
Here.
Todd Fields. Okay, I don't see Todd. Laura Isdell. Okay, I don't see Laura either. Julia Vickery.
Here.
Hannah Dalen. Louis Franco.
Here.
Billy Legault.
Here.
Rebecca Lothringer.
Here.
Michelle Walker.
Here.
And Tristan Pepper notified us last night that he would be unable to join us. So we do have a quorum. Thank you all. I would like to take a moment to review our meeting guidelines, just to review those for all of us. This meeting is being live streamed via YouTube. So we ask that you please mute your microphone when not speaking. We will continue recording through breaks, so please mute your microphone when we are on break. For this open meeting, we ask that you always keep your camera on. A quorum has been established via roll call. We ask that you please identify yourself prior to speaking for the record. I ask that you wait for one person to finish before speaking. Otherwise, comments can become muddled or unclear. Should the conversation become unmanageable, which I don't think it will, I will direct you to use the raise hand feature. And this can be found if you click on participants icon and you will see the three buttons toward the bottom of the list. So please raise your hand and lower your hand after you've had time to speak. We will only use this feature if it's needed. And so I appreciate your willingness to be flexible. For this meeting, motions will be voted on by raising your hand in the camera and saying "I" in favor or "No" if you oppose. Please keep your hands raised so we can see you and capture the votes. At the end of the meeting, please be aware that the meeting is still being recorded. Upon adjournment, we ask that you keep your comments limited so staff can stop the recording. The coordinating board staff will monitor emails at the email address listed on the slides and will address questions related to the agenda items. Are there any questions? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move on to agenda item number 2, which is acknowledgement of members finishing their term. We want to take time to acknowledge the great work of the committee members that have served their 2-year term and will be rolling off the advisory committee. And I want to recognize them at this time. Paula Arredondo from Texas State Technical College, Dr. Mordecai Brownlee from St. Philip's College, Indra Pelez from Houston Community College, Kevin Davis from Stephen F. Austin University, Leah Hickman from Midwestern State University, Dara Newton from the University of Texas at Rio Grande Valley, Angie Taylor from Sam Houston State University, and Dr. Miguel Washleski from the University of Texas at Austin. Thank you all for your contributions and work during this unique time of transition and certainly helping us navigate through a pandemic. Your work has helped improve the ApplyTexas system, especially for students who use the application. We would also like to recognize the work of our 2-year co-chair, Dr. Mordecai Brownlee. Mordecai has been instrumental in assisting the committee on improving ApplyTexas communication by creating the Communication Subcommittee. He's also been an advocate for several other college access initiatives like GenTex, and it has been an honor to serve as a co-chair with Dr. Brownlee, and I thank you for the service to our field. And Claudette, I think you wanted to make a few comments.
Yes, I do. Thank you. We did want to formally announce that Dr. Mordecai Brownlee will be leaving us. He has recently been named president for Aurora Community College in Colorado. And so we want to congratulate you on your effort. We're really sad to see you go to another state, no doubt. But we're very excited for you, very happy for you. And we do want to commend you on all the work that you've done. When Mordecai joined the committee 2 years ago, he was the very first to say, yes, I want to be the 2-year co-chair. And since, he's done great things, including created the subcommittee for communications and has led that work as well. So we want to thank you. Like I said, we're really sad to see you leave us. You've been a great asset to us in this committee and move things forward. So we appreciate all your work and your commitment, and we hope that you remain in touch with us here in Texas.
Mordecai, you realize it's still snowing in Colorado.
I know
This
my
week.
wife said that this morning. I'm like, well, get ready.
Mordecai, do you want to say a few words real quickly? We just want to.
Thank you so much, Claudette. That was unexpected. It's been an absolute honor to serve with you all. I've enjoyed our time. I really miss being able to see you all on a quarterly basis and us all spend that time in Austin, and of course, sharing pickles and salty chips. I really was looking forward to that and all the meetings. But it's been an honor to serve, and thank you all. Blessings to you, your family, your institutions. We've done some great work, and we still have great work to be done. And so thank you, and let me know how I can support you. Thank you.
We appreciate that, Mordecai. And like Jamie said, we have Mordecai was helpful in not only ApplyTexas, but our other state initiatives like Generation Texas. He's a big tweet person and social media person, so we were able to get him involved in that too. So he was a great help. So we appreciate that, Mordecai. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudette. Jamie, would you like me to move on to item 3?
Yes, sir. That would be great. Thank you.
Awesome. And Claudette, we thank you for your leadership as well, and all of the THECB staff. You all are amazing. Thank you all. Okay, everybody. At this time, item 3, please review the minutes from the meeting on February the 10th. That should have been emailed to you. February 10th, 2021. Take a few minutes and let us know if there's any need for a change or edit. And we'll give you a few moments to take a look at your emails that were sent. And let us know again if there's any opportunities for changes or edits.
My name has an A on the end and it has an E in the minutes. This is Julia Vickery.
Thank you, Julia. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
I move that the minutes be approved as presented.
Okay. And with that one edit, thank you so much, Michelle. Do I have a second?
This is Angie Taylor, a second.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Angie. Make sure I'm capturing names here. All right, members, by show of hands, what you'll do is you'll hold your hand to the screen. Please don't cut your face off while you're holding your hand. But show your hands at this time if you are in favor for the minutes. Very good. All right, everyone put their hands down. All opposed, if please put your hands up to the screen at this time. Okay, I see a cat tail, Rebecca, so we won't count that one. We're good. Okay, motion passes. We're going to move to agenda item 4. This is a standing agenda item. This is the update for Strategic Planning Subcommittee. Miguel will provide the Strategic Subcommittee update. Mr. Miguel.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Just want to give a quick update on where we are with the information we presented back in, I think February is the last time we met. So we were able to look at some of the concerns at that point and make some modifications to our report. We met with a subgroup. And I think really at this point, what I wanted to focus in on is really sort of more of the next steps of how to actually process the variety of recommendations that can come from that report. I mean, as we remember, this report was really sort of a effort to gather input from a variety of different individuals, and whether it be, you know, our partners in the schools, high schools, students, parents. It really was an effort to get some feedback. At the same time, we know that the group of individuals on the technical team, you know, in the transition to Amazon, have done a number of things that might be highlighted in these reports. And so when we think about the key sort of recommendations that could come from this report, there are some technical things such as, you know, a save feature, web accessibility, those sorts of things. But then there's also more of the sort of, and I guess, for lack of a better word, qualitative aspect of it. You know, how does a person actually flow through it? You know, what sort of questions are institutions asking? Because that obviously adds to the complexity of that application. Is how complex as an institution do we make it with all the optional questions that we can ask? It feels as if with these individual recommendations, these really need to be translated into individual proposals. So as we would normally do within the ApplyTexas committee is, you know, we want to make a change to the application. We submit a change request, and then that's an item that gets placed on the agenda as this is something to discuss. And so, for example, if it was something like an auto-save feature, that might be a conversation where we look at that individual topic, you know, have the technical team assess that. Maybe it's something that's already in motion. If not, is that something that for the committee, it's a priority? So I really think it's at a point now where, you know, based upon the information that we provided, where perhaps in the next series of meetings, we can add these as individual agenda items. And I'd be happy to have those submitted as individual requests. I don't want to overload a meeting. So we don't want to have like 50 different things to discuss in that meeting. But perhaps we can sort of prioritize and you know, really put in some suggestions that we can talk about as a group and see what makes most sense for the application moving forward. So I'll pause there for a second, see if there's any questions about any of that.
Pardon me, Claudette, Rebecca Lothringer got kicked out and is trying to get back in. Can we allow her back in? I'm sorry to
Yes.
interrupt.
Oh, no problem. Let's see.
She's in the waiting room.
She's in the, oh, there she is. Okay, there. Well, we got her.
Thank you.
Sure.
I mean, Claudette, does that make sense as a sort of a you know, a way to approach this going forward?
I do like that idea. I think that, to your point about not overwhelming everything, I'm trying to think the way that we've processed other proposals, you know, since it's one by one, if you take the recommendations and kind of identify each one, and then from what I'm hearing you say is take each of the recommendations, put it in a proposal to the committee formally, and then you guys review, discuss, and consider as a prioritization. And I think that's a good way to do that, especially getting assistance from our ApplyTexas technical team to make sure that we know how much each of those recommendations will, how long or what effort it takes for each of those recommendations to make those changes, and to also find out where they are in the process of some of the recommendations, because we know that from Dr. Zach Taylor's report and this report, there are things that are already moving. So it might be helpful to kind of discuss those and say, okay, we've completed it, and formally record where we are in the process. So I personally think that would be a good idea. Does anyone else have any comments? Mordecai?
Thank you, Claudette. So Miguel, my question is, and it was, you just brought it up, Claudette, the recent report that was given by Trellis and Dr. Zach Taylor. Out of curiosity, Miguel, are we planning as a body to use that work as our environmental scan, or are we going to be conducting our own environmental scan to drive our strategic plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can definitely continue to rely on multiple scans that exist there. I mean, certainly we have our own report that looked at the environment from a different way than Trellis did. But I do think that the information reported by Trellis is useful and should be part of the information that we assess when we look at these individual items. So we can't ignore that information is out there, and it was well done and put together in a way that helps provide some context as to why people may be feeling a certain way. Ultimately, it comes down to a combination of the multiple data sources to help inform our decision making.
Thank you.
Sure.
And I do agree. A lot of the feedback we've been receiving through Dr. Taylor's report, as well as the report that Miguel led with the team for the strategic planning subcommittee, as well as some other feedback we've gotten. I know during the last call Erin Willig provided a little bit of context on what she was seeing in the field as well. So all of this is leading towards improvement to the application, which is what we're trying to seek currently. So as Miguel mentioned, we are looking at other analysis also to make these changes. And is there any other comment on the next steps that Miguel is proposing? Because I think that's a good idea.
And so what I'll do is I will convert those items to individual requests so that the technical team has plenty of time to review those, and perhaps we can add that to an agenda item to the normal agenda item that is for new things in the next meeting.
All right, thank you, Miguel.
Sure, thank you.
All right, I believe that concludes that agenda item. Okay, team, we're going to move forward now to an update from the Communication Subcommittee. And then I will provide that update. And so essentially, since the last time that we met, there's been two conversations essentially that have happened that have impacted the Communication Subcommittee somewhat. One of those being has been a conversation with Ms. Claudette Jenks regarding that there is a hiring process. And Claudette, by all means, please provide clarity or the accuracy of this information, but there is a hiring currently underway within the coordinating board that is going to ensure a communication strategy for THECB that will also impact ApplyTexas. So we are currently awaiting more information regarding the guidance as well as the charge of those positions that will be driving that agenda. Is there more that you would like to add there, Claudette?
I'm taking notes while we're doing this, so I apologize. Yes, we have hired, someone has been hired for the position to create a new communications division here at the agency. We're still working internally to see what efforts and how this person or that team can best support the work of all of our initiatives in our division and across the agency. So we're still in that process. So I don't have a big update, but I know that they've been receptive to working with us. It's just learning what that process is, how we might better streamline our efforts and communication out to the field. Like I mentioned during the last meeting, we have internally some existing communication channels through our listservs and social media. So we're in the meantime, and until we kind of work with our new communications team, we'll be utilizing those avenues to get messaging out. And then of course we'll work with our ApplyTexas team. They have also a listserv that they work with the administrative in their administrative suite, and we do have a list of counselors that we can communicate to through ApplyTexas as well. So I think we're good at this point as we're rolling out the new ApplyTexas information, and I think. But we are trying to, based on your feedback and your work, Mordecai, we are looking at improving our communication channels for sure and creating a better communication strategy.
All right, thank you for that, Claudette. Thank you, and a big thank you to the subcommittee members that have participated in this work. Definitely want to honor you all as well. And then the other update that I would say somewhat, because, Jamie, I'll put you here on the spot because I believe that you serve on that presidential council. So just recently, there was an ApplyTexas presentation that was given to a body of colleagues here in the state of Texas that also had involved Mr. David and our THECB, our ApplyTexas technical team, in which we provided an update on where things are and how we're tracking. Jamie, do you want to talk about that body of colleagues I believe that you serve with?
Sure. It's the ESCC group, and there's a few folks that are members of the ApplyTexas Advisory Committee that also serve on that. And so Claudette, Graham, and David all attended the past meeting, and it's enrollment managers focused with financial aid and admissions that serve on that committee. And they report up to the Council of Presidents for Public Universities. And so David and Graham gave a great presentation. It was very similar to the one that we saw in February. They were able to answer questions from our colleagues around the state. And I think the ESCC committee was very appreciative because, of course, they supervise admissions and they want to know what's going on. And so I think a lot of their questions were answered. So I do appreciate David, Graham, and Claudette being available to visit with them. Any questions about that group, or is there anything that David, Graham, Claudette, you'd want to add?
Okay, thank you, David. Go ahead, Claudette.
Just to let everyone know, I mean, again, another effort on the part of our communications is to let everyone know what's going on. And David and Graham did a good job in answering questions. There were not a lot of questions like we thought there might be. So it does seem like people are aware of some of the changes that are coming. We're still making some great efforts on communicating those changes. I was surprised that we didn't get more questions that we did, but we were prepared. The staff was prepared. So I think they did an excellent job in communicating. And we also want to open up to any other groups that are interested in hearing more about this. We're trying to figure out ways in which we can communicate any of the changes and create more of a streamlined approach. So I do thank David and Graham and both Mordecai and Jamie for being present also.
All right, thank you all. At this time, that concludes the Communication Subcommittee report. Item 6.
Okay, item 6, update from the ApplyTexas technical team, which is a standing agenda item. You should have received the update in your meeting materials. So please see the section labeled current cycle for updates and proposals. It's at the top of the document. And I'm going to ask David Muck to provide the ApplyTexas technical team update.
Thank you, Jamie. Update on the first item, just an update on numbers for this incomplete fall semester. We've seen a lot of progress in catching up to our normal numbers. It's been an ongoing issue that we were down so much last year in the midst of COVID. Currently, we're down 7% on submitted applications across the entire semester. 4-year apps are down 5% and 2-year apps are down 14%. Again, this has been a steady improvement. We were down at 1.35% late last year. Update on the impact to ApplyTexas from the Texas weather electricity grid failure event that everybody went through in February. We actually had to take ApplyTexas offline for 14 hours on, what was the date? February 17th at 8 p.m. We needed to take it offline, and it was offline through the next morning at 10 a.m. Before taking it offline, we did confirm there were no impending deadlines that night, so the impact was minimal. And I tried to go back and look. I'm pretty sure this 14-hour outage is the longest maybe that ApplyTexas has ever been down in a continuous stretch. but at least for the last 15 years. Over that time period, also, UT Austin campus was closed. We had power outages in the areas, so there were delays at times in responding to applicants as quickly as possible. After that 14-hour period, we were up the whole time, but the technical team had some issues. We had power losses at our houses and stuff like that, so we weren't as quick responding to some of our applicant emails as we normally are, but we did catch up. And obviously that put some of our development time, delayed some of that development time as well, since we were closed for most of those 2 weeks. Update on our alpha user acceptance testing. That's been going well. We've gotten some fantastic suggestions from the folks that were kind enough to participate. We've implemented a lot of those suggestions for improvement already. And we've also created tickets for a lot of other suggestions that we think would be enhancements, and put them in our backlog of items to work on. The primary focus so far has been the administrative site, so that when we do open it up June 1 on our normal development cycle, that admins are able to get in there and update their settings as always. And then yesterday we opened up the application, and we're planning on the same type of thing. We want to hear feedback from our testers, so we can make some improvements to what they're seeing, and move forward from there. We have had a continued problem with fraudulent applications. We had a particularly large batch early in April that we spent some time diagnosing and implementing some further measures to try to curb that issue. And then I'm happy to report we've had a number of institutions opt into additional application deliveries, which is great. We're offering application deliveries at 7 a.m., 12 p.m., and 6 p.m. The more we have schools participating in additional delivery times, the faster all of those delivery times happen. And we're once we do get moved to AWS, we're planning to offer even more flexibility with some of the application delivery. We know some folks would like them even more often than the times we're currently offering, and we plan to offer that. And then we're continuing to our collaboration with the TEA and the transcript request service is ongoing. We might want to look at that at some point. The number of schools we have participating is very small. We think it's valuable to those schools that are participating, but we simply don't have very many high schools or colleges participating right now. So that might be something that we want to look at in the future to either see if we should tweak that service somehow, or what can make that better. We think that it would be a great service for an applicant to be able to go in, complete their application, request their transcript, but we want to make sure that process works for the applicant, for you all, and for high school counselors and high school registrar offices. So I would suggest we take a good look at that over the next year or two.
David, I have a quick comment and maybe a question.
Sure.
For those that are fairly new to the committee, I wanted to let you know some historical information. Our agency back in the last legislative session, I believe, did try to, because we heard from this group that there was an interest in utilizing the TREX system to have transcripts done through the T-Rex system rather than the hard copy forms that they get from other systems. So we tried and attempted to do that. It didn't pass, but we did put out a memo from our commissioner and the Commissioner of Education to encourage school districts to use the TREX system. I don't know if it's TREX or T-Rex, but to use the system. So we're still trying to do this effort through this. Although it's slow going, there might be some more interest in working together with your school districts to say, we want to partner and see how this might work better for you, especially the school districts that are applying to your institutions, those that are applying to your institution. So I see Billy has his hand raised, so I'll go ahead. Billy?
Yeah, Billy Legel, University of Houston, Victoria. I was curious, is there a lot of upstart setup required by the high school or the districts that might be creating some hesitancy, or is it just we want to participate and apply to the setup?
On our end, there's not very much setup at all. I'm not sure on the school's end. I believe a lot of schools have a preference towards another tool for that, but I'm not sure on the details.
I can speak to that as well, and anyone else who may be interested can share as also. From what I'm hearing is it's easier for counselors to go through the existing systems that they use to transfer, but those transfers are going to be PDFs to the institutions. They have a lot of issues with the T-Rex system. I believe it, for lack of better words, clunky. And so there's a disinterest in using the T-Rex system. When we were trying to make this recommendation to the legislature last session or the session before, I can't remember when, it's been a while, but I did talk to the leaders or the workers around the T-Rex system, and they assure us that 99% of all school districts use this. But what we realized is that they use it for internal, from school to school or campus to campus at the K through 12 level, not to higher ed institutions. So I wasn't able to really assess how many you do use it to transfer, which it sounds from this committee and others that it is minimal, but to transfer to a higher ed institution. So, but that's what we've heard, is that school districts have a difficult time utilizing the T-Rex system, so they choose to use their other software systems. I see Dara has her hand raised.
Thank you. I was going to say, if you currently don't use it, but you've been able to work out a process with the school district, it is really a beautiful thing to load into your system, but it takes a lot of effort between the institution and the school district to figure out some of the nuances that come with the load process. So we have some really nice loads that happen with some of our school districts in South Texas, and then we have some challenges. So you do have to bring both the district and your institution together to really go through the process. But when it loads, it's really, really nice if you have some of your larger school districts, and then it just lives in your system.
I have a question or a comment too, as well as Angie Taylor at Simpson State. I'll follow up on what Dara said, that over the past 5 years, we have seen our T-Rex deliveries increase for our districts as well. And so it is very nice the way that it comes in. And so my question would be, if they're sending it to us, because we encourage just this process as well to have them, if they're already sending T-Rex, and with the application, have that come over. So just to clarify, David, if they are already sending us the T-Rex, how much harder would it be for them to opt into the automatic delivery? Is there any kind of holdup there if they're already sending us the T-Rex?
No, it's a radio button. Yes or no.
Okay.
It's really easy on our end.
So there's nothing else that they would have to do if we've already worked out the sending process for them. Just
Right.
encouraging them to do it.
Right. From our end, opting them in to have their application or have their school appear
That
is
question at the
very
bottom,
easy.
yeah, okay.
David, can we talk a little bit about the alpha testing going on? I'm interested in a little bit of information about how many alpha testers and what's the makeup of that group, right? So how many are from 2-year, 4-year schools, independent versus public? Just a little bit about that user group.
Sure. Lorraine's giving it to me right now.
Okay, sorry to put you on the spot. I
So
apologize.
no, that's okay. I had already asked because I wanted to publicly thank everybody that has participated. So we reached out to all the folks that were really active in giving us feedback last year. And that list is Midwestern State University, University of Texas at Rio Grande Valley, Sam Houston State University, Angelo State University, University of Houston Clear Lake, University of Texas at Arlington, Texas Tech University, Stephen F. Austin, and the University of Houston at Victoria, and Texas A&M University. We've authorized 60 alpha testers. And then I think of that group, we got responses back from, I believe, 6 or 7 folks that sort of collated some of the testing at their schools and send it back. And just wanted to thank everybody. I know it's a super busy time for everybody, and we really appreciate those of you that took the time to go through and give us some suggestions and feedback.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Are there any 2-year schools in that testing group? I didn't hear you mention. I mean, all the schools you listed, I think, were 4-year public.
No,
I
I don't think there's any 2 years. I think. Thank you, Jamie. That was my hand raised. Let me lower my hand here.
Oh,
I was curious to
I'm
know.
sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. For that reason that you just brought up, Jamie, I was curious to know, David, are there opportunities for the 2-year colleges? Maybe this
Absolutely.
body of individuals, or maybe those not on this call today that may want to participate. How should we go about informing of our interest?
Just send a request to the help desk. We're ready to get more folks in there.
Okay, so fellow 2-year college partners, if y'all can help share the message. You all just became ad hoc communication subcommittee members, but if you could please, in the 2-year space, please share that opportunity with our colleagues so we can ensure that the 2-year institutions in the state of Texas are represented. Thank you.
Are there any other questions concerning the current cycle updates and proposals for David or Graham? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move on to agenda item 7. Maybe before we do that, I should ask, does anybody need a break? I know that we haven't been on about 45 minutes now, but would you like to take a break or keep going?
Jamie, I see David with a hand raised. I'm not sure if that's regarding a break or not.
Okay.
No, it's not a break. I can't remember. So I've got the future cycle proposals on there as well. We're waiting on that, correct?
Yes, I wanted to see if
Okay.
anybody needed a break, and then we'll move right into that.
Okay.
But it doesn't look like anybody needs a break. So let's just keep going. David, let's move on to agenda item 7, which is the discussion and possible action to adopt proposed changes to ApplyTexas forms and procedures, which is the second part of that document you provided.
All right. So I just carried these over from last meeting. I don't think we took final action on any of them. The first was a proposal to add a grade received field to the education information section to facilitate self-reporting of grades. The second was a proposal, we talked about this quite a bit last session, a proposal to add a question if the applicant enters a cell phone number to offer them the option to opt into text messaging because a lot of schools have custom questions set up already that do that. And I've got the charge coming out of last meeting was for me to try to find some common language and provide a mock-up, and I've got that ready if we want to look at that as a group. We can do that now, or I can work through the rest of these and then we can come back.
Unless somebody objects, I think it might be helpful if we work through that now. That way we can stay in order.
Okay.
I think the linear approach might be helpful to all of us.
All right. Share screen. Okay, so this is on the profile, and you can see I've got a preferred phone number set up, and then an alternate phone number. Right now, they're home and work. If either of these is designated as a cell phone, then the following question would come up. It reads, many schools use text messaging to communicate important admissions information to prospective students. Do you grant permission to the schools to which you are applying to send you text messages? And then the two responses are yes, please allow text messaging. No, do not send me text messages. And then there's some boilerplate at the bottom that says your information is not shared with third parties and you may opt out at any time. Standard messaging rates may apply. So that's what I worked up. And we can, I guess, I don't know if we talk about that now, or Claudette, does that wait till later? I can't remember how that works.
Well, you've kind of reviewed sorry, I'm tripping over my words. The committee received the future cycle, the list of future cycle items that are for consideration. So if you want to review them all at once and then go one to one, this is where you would be voting on whether or not you want to include it in the next cycle for consideration for the next cycle. So this is where the work would be done and the voting would be happening here. So do you want to review?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jenny.
I was just going to ask, since it's already mocked up, what's the work time that it would require? Is
very minimal.
Okay. Okay. Any discussion, any thoughts about moving forward with this? Mm-hmm.
Could we go back to the original request form and gain the intent of the benefit of adding this question? I'm assuming it was for somebody who doesn't already have possibly a CRM or a question like this in place already. And I'm not opposed to adding it. It would just mean adjusting on, if you already have that added other places, how many times are we asking the students to opt in or out, and adjusting our further processes. So just kind of getting an idea of the initial intent of why they needed the question. I'm not sure if anybody else has any insight or concerns or questions on that.
Well, this is Michelle Walker, Texas A&M. I can tell you often we will, if everybody is putting the same question as a shoebox, then often we will try to add it to the basic application. And I think that we've moved to a place where this is true for this kind of question. I know we have one asking students if they agree to receive text messages. So in the context of our higher education world today, it seems appropriate that would be asked once, and not asked every time a student is filling out a new app. So it prevents them from having to answer it specifically for each institution. They can answer it once and it'll carry over.
Indra has her hand raised.
I have to go find the virtual hand feature. So this is Indra, HCC. How long do we, if we decide to approve this, how long do we have to map this to our system? Because this question is not in our system. So we need to map it into PeopleSoft or whatever, the CRM, in order to avoid duplicate communication to the students and journeys.
It would be a new field in the EDI that we transmit, and just a yes/no value. So since we're, I guess, July 1 or whenever you're opening your application is the time frame at this point, unless we wanted to push this to a future cycle.
Thank you.
So if I recap correctly, David, this is a request. It would be limited amount of work for the team to input this question, and to Indra's point, it would be a new field for the EDI to be transmitted. So there would be, so that would be happening over the summer with all the other changes, correct? Okay, Rebecca, I see your hands raised.
Good morning, Rebecca Lothringer, UTA. I was wondering, on the 2 radio buttons, it looks like right now we have them both as vacant. Is there interest of the committee to have it default to one or the other? I'm sitting here thinking about what happens if they don't answer the question. Do we just assume it's a yes? Do we assume it's a no? So that's, I wanted to bring that up to the committee to see what others were thinking.
David, could you please share your screen again so we could see it?
Sure.
They could make it required. Required.
I did make it required.
Yeah.
I thought
that makes sense to me.
I thought make it required and don't default to either. Have them make a choice.
And this is Mordecai. The one thing that comes to mind that I see as an opportunity, this may be an opportunity, I'll say this for the communications team, to really partner with, the new staff that's going to be hired, or the currently hired, Claudette, that you brought up, because this kind of goes to what Indra just said, to where if the college is not aware that this is being collected, and the student perhaps says no, but it hasn't been properly mapped and they weren't aware that it was a part of the change, that there could be some implication there. So it just comes down to communicating. This is a pretty significant change, I think, that impacts everyone, whether it be manual or those who use CRMs. And we just need to think about how we share to our body of colleagues that this has been a change. That way, if a student begins for any reason or anyone complains and says, well, I said no, yet I'm still getting test messages, what's happened?
You bring up a good point. Maybe it's not the point that you're raising, but if a student selects no here, but is asked the same question at the institution and they say yes, is there any kind of implications there? It might be digging into the weeds, but that's just a question with, the institution taking ownership of messaging the student based on other questions that they may ask them outside of the application. That's where I'm thinking. Go ahead, Indra.
Indra from HCC. I know we asked this question in our request for information for perspective and anyone looking for information. So we would, at HCC, we would have to think about a process, which one overrides. So if the student submits an application and then changes his or her mind, do we override that versus what we receive? So we have to work as a team to build our process and think which one overrides which one.
This is Rebecca, UTA. We all know that it's going to happen because students change their mind, or a parent fills out the application and opts out, and then the student will fill out an application or another form later and put opt in. So It's a good question, Claudette, if we would have any implications from that. I personally don't think so, because you would take the most recent answer from the student and that would be the answer that stands. So in answering your question, that's my feeling on that, because it's going to fluctuate back and forth, I'm sure, between yes and no as the student progresses through their college life cycle.
This is Michelle. The other point to that is students have the opportunity to opt in as well if they previously said no. I know some of our systems have that available. So like Rebecca said, they're going to go back and forth, and we're used to managing that.
I think we have another hand raised, Luis.
Yeah, I would second everything that's been said, but I think that that's where the communication part that Dr. Brownlee mentioned, because I think for us to suggest that, or to kind of bring that in the communication saying, hey, this update has happened, so that offices can kind of be aware and be having those conversations that Indo talked about that at their teams, because so that way they can determine those internal procedures or policies on, okay, we need to review, does it default to the latest? Is it what we have in the CRM versus in our student information system? They came through ApplyTexas response, or they fill out a card. And obviously this happens to kind of, was mentioned kind of throughout those different stages, right? And they have indicated something at the time when they were just a prospect and fill out a card versus when they actually applied versus as they get admitted and now they really do want to receive information. Maybe it wasn't about the admissions or the application process, it's just about enrollment or any of the other things that the university might be doing, because I think there's other things to consider as well. Other offices outside of admissions are also texting. I know on our campus, for example, so a student may say on their application, I don't want to be texted, but when they become admitted, now advising is texting them, or orientation is texting, because everybody's using texting, right? So I think it's just an invitation as part of when if we implement this for whoever is on those communication, to be able to say, hey, we need to have some conversations and start having that internally, whatever that looks like on your campus. I don't think we did that, but just to say, hey, something to think about, because this is something that was added to it. Like, just not too soon.
Angie, I think you had your hand up as well.
Thank you. I was just going to make a notice for anybody who might not be aware that on the ApplyTexas site and the announcements or the information for all administrators, there's always listed the new changes for the upcoming cycle that has everything that you could send out to your teams who need to know. And David, do y'all have an estimated date of when y'all like to post that every year so that we could send it to our teams?
We try to get it out as quickly as we can after this final ATAC meeting, where all the final proposals for changes have been finalized. We'd certainly want to get that out by June 1.
Thank you.
Chantel.
This is Dr. Chantel Blake. I think that maybe we should consider allowing this decision to be managed at the campus level, unless the communication will be coming, the texting will be coming strictly from ApplyTexas. It may be best to allow the campuses to manage this, because we all have different CRMs. We all have different areas that utilize text messaging. So that's just a suggestion. And like I said, unless the messaging itself will be strictly about ApplyTexas and not implicate the communication from our institutions, that we may want to consider allowing this to be taken care of on the campus level. It's just a suggestion.
Maybe Michelle has her hand raised.
Yes, I was just seeing that.
I just want to kind of put out a reminder that, you know, just because the data is sent doesn't mean that you have to use it. So if the question were asked on the application and perhaps your institution already has something else built and you're comfortable with that, it just means you're going to get a data point in the EDI that you're not going to use. So asking, you know, I'm not sure if that's a concern to anyone, or if the concern is that the student would answer it twice somehow. But from my perspective, I'm in favor of this just because students are having to answer the same question for every institution that they apply to, because it's currently exists as a custom question, not as part of the basic ApplyTexas. And I don't know if that concerns anyone else, if that's an issue or not.
Thank you, Michelle. Mordecai?
I'll just jump in on blow my hand here. I'll jump in there and say, a lot of great points have been made. I know for me, and just going back to the reason why I posed the question the way that I did, because for some people, this becomes a matter of trust, right? I'm already beginning to develop a relationship with the institution. I'm already stating for you what my desires are. And if there's anything that may be different that I may be experienced after this application process, for some, they may interpret that as a trust, or you're not paying attention, or you're not listening to what my desires are. And that could implicate in terms of that trust relationship that's being built between the applicant and the actual institution. I think for that reason, it's the reason why I can see it both ways. I mean, great points have been raised as well that individuals shift and change at different points along their journey. So, I'll go to whatever's about the group decides to vote on it. But that's where I was coming from. It was that matter of trust and how that is interpreted for some.
Thank you. Dara?
Dara Newton, UTRGV. I was just going to say, I really like the idea of the text messaging question being on the profile. It opens the door more even to institutions with dual credit students, knowing that sometimes is a great way to also connect when they are in the high school. And I feel like it is a benefit when it is now across all applications versus having to manage custom questions associated with multiple applications. I think it helps to streamline, and that then if we needed to, we could also add just a little blurb that down there that says that all institutions may not text based on XYZ. If we wanted to just account for not every institution potentially texting, we could put that in there as that custom question. I'm not custom question, along with the profile, just as a disclaimer, if that made other institutions feel a little more comfortable.
Thank you, Dara. Chantel?
Yes, I can see that. But for the institutions that choose not to pull the custom question in, as a student, if I answered no, but the institution that I applied for did not pull that in, and then they text me, then I can see that be confusing and maybe an issue for me personally for whatever my reasons were.
Thank you, Chantel. Rebecca?
I agree. I'm going to say basically the same thing, plus add one more little caveat. I don't like the idea of ignoring an answer that's put on here. I think there is an implicit idea that once I answer that question, you're going to follow what I have said. My concern is that, and I think Dr. Dr. Blake. I think Dr. Blake, you brought this up a minute ago. The campus wide have different texting for different offices. Someone mentioned that, and that is absolutely true. So my concern beyond the fact that it's on the application is I can't tell you that orientation is going to go double check and then not text students. My final concern on this is I think there's regulations around if a student says do not contact me in this way, and I believe it comes with fines. So we need to be really sure that we are checking this out if we're going to put this on an application. Once a student opts out, I really think there's a regulation around it, and that if you break that regulation, that there's a fine that's associated with it. I am not in favor right now of putting this on here the way it is. Dara mentioned putting a phrase on there that may get us around it, and I would absolutely say that we have to put a phrase that not all universities or colleges may follow your recommendation or your answer to this question. There's a lot of implications to putting this on there and what the students will expect.
Thank you, Rebecca. Dara?
I didn't take my hand down. So that's my fault, Jamie. So
Okay, just checking. Michelle?
So I agree with what Rebecca has said and with what Chantel has said. I think I was thinking from the standpoint that you have asked permission to text. I know for Texas A&M, we cannot text a student if we don't have explicit permission from the student to text them. So we are gathering that permission in a different way, not just from the app, perhaps. So that was my thinking, was that you could potentially ignore the response here, but again, I agree with you after thinking further that perhaps you could get yourself in trouble. So, you know, I'm good with what's decided.
Thank you, Michelle. Claudette?
I just wanted to add, you know, because I know some of the discussion from the last meeting was how this differs from what's in there regarding messaging from ADV. And I think because there was a question that was added to the application to explicitly opt into receiving messages from the ADV tool. This question does not specify any thing. It just says schools may contact you. So that's just something I wanted to make clear through the discussion.
Any other comments or feedback? And if not, should we take a vote to either move forward or to, okay, Angie, you have another comment?
I do. Sorry. Well, I'm just thinking through like that last comment and the idea of when whoever's bringing this up, they have a need. And I don't know if they're watching this this session, or how are we following back up with them and explaining why a decision was made and how we can keep them moving along, and where they might not be as far along in as a topic as another school is, and how can we still help them meet their goals or explain our decision. Is that a process that is currently happening with anybody from the board that reaches back out with the specific decisions that we make?
I was trying to get back to the original request, but my Microsoft Word was not my emails weren't working properly. So I wasn't able to pull that up in a timely manner, but we have begun to make more strides in making this communication log where we receive the request, contact for more information, or bring the person to the committee to talk through, like we did with our internal with Mindy Nobles and some others that wanted to give some more information about their request. You can still do this if you want to table it to next cycle. You can bring the original requester to talk to you about this specifically, or we can reach out to them asking. That's another process that either from my understanding, it's from the ApplyTexas committee or ApplyTexas team would do. That would, to me, be their role to get more clarification, but we're still trying to figure out this role of communicating and gathering more information to make sure that we have their needs met. But I don't even remember who the original request came from. David, do you know? I know it's in the document.
University of the Incarnate Word.
Right. So that might be because they're a specific, that, like you said, they may not have this information or a system that they have that other institutions have. So we can reach out, but it sounds to me that a majority of institutions have processes in place already. So it's up to the committee to decide whether or not you want to add this, considering the discussion. And you also have an option to table for more consideration, and we can reach out to Incarnate Word to say, this is still up for consideration. That's something you can do.
Dr. Brownlee?
Go ahead, Jamie. I'll let you, please, and then I'll follow you.
No. I was going to say, where do we want to go from here? So please add your comment.
I was going to make a recommendation that we table, perhaps even bring the individual forward so we could hear their context, their thoughts. We certainly want to support our members. However, I think that we all now kind of realize there's different sides of the coins on this. That would be my recommendation.
I agree. I support that as well. Does anybody oppose us tabling it? Oh,
I didn't know if I need to
Louis.
officially make a motion.
Okay.
It may
Luis,
continue to
you
make,
think-
sorry, Luis, go ahead.
All right. No, I was just going to say, Luis Franco Dallas, that I support that. I think what's important though is because we have tabled this and kind of, if I was the person that submitted this, you know, if there is no communication going on, I don't know if there isn't, but just so that way you know, besides just, oh, it's pending or now come forward. But I think if some of the information could be shared, obviously if they can be directed to the recording of this if they want to, but just some way so that way they know when they come, okay, here's what I'm hearing, or now maybe they've heard this and now they've decided that maybe it's not a question they want to continue to move forward, or now they've thought about how they can address it internally, to Dr. Blake's point, and kind of as a campus decide what's best for them. So I think if we can just provide that feedback, so that way if they do come, then we can make a final decision. Because I think it's also important, you know, maybe if they have been waiting to figure out something else and they're like, oh, I didn't even know that we still have this question, you know, pending for approval. So just if there isn't some sort of communication, not just about when it gets denied, but just as it's being moved through the process. So that way that person that submitted can kind of be more educated, I guess, to kind of when they come present to share either the actual data pieces or information or address some of those questions.
Thank you, Luis. Chantel, you have your hand raised as well.
Yes, I agree that we table it and ask that they do come, because we do want to make sure that whatever need that prompted the question is taken care of. And maybe possibly there's an alternate action that can be taken by the committee to help them. So I really agree that we should table it and then see how we can help.
At this time, Jamie, I'll make a motion that we table as well as engage the member who's made the request to come to our fall meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second? I can't see everybody on the screen. So if you would like to second, please. Chantel.
Yes, this is Chantel Blake. I'd like to second the motion.
Excellent. David, can we take this screen off so that I can see everybody? Thank you. I appreciate that. So members, by show of hands, please raise your hand whether you are voting to table this until the next meeting. And if you're in favor, please raise your hand and say aye and keep your hand raised so that we can capture that vote. And if okay. All right. Thank you. So the motion passes for us to table this until the next meeting that we have in the fall. David, would you like to move on to the next question or the next item?
Sure. The next proposal for change was a proposal to add fields to collect the Pearson test of English scores to the test score pages. This proposal was by Pearson. Do we want to discuss, move on?
Let's discuss this like we did the previous item. Can you share a little bit more about this?
Sorry, yes. So this request came directly to me and I shared with the UT ApplyTexas team. We had one of the PTE academic manager, well, it's a U.S. recognition manager. She submitted a request. She presented the formal form to add these different types of tests into the ApplyTexas system. Let's see, I'm trying to look at what she sent me most recently because she did follow up. She sent a recognition list. It says that PTE academic is accepted by thousands of organizations worldwide. So she's got, all of these different areas of where the tests are accepted. And let me see. So I think what her ultimate request was just to add these tests so that students can select them from the drop-down menu. It's really, again, a request of what you want to do with it. I don't know how often these tests are used and what difference or impact it would make in adding them. I guess we can start off by David, knowing the request is how much work would it take for adding any of these tests?
I'd want to know exactly what are there, are we collecting scores? I think with SAT and SAT and ACT, we don't currently collect the scores, just whether they've taken it and date taken. So that would be the main information to know is, are we collecting scores? What format are those scores expected to be in? Numeric, alpha, numeric? Basically, what exactly would be collecting? I don't think it would be a huge add to the application, but that's what we would want to know.
So the request, and I think you have this, but it's been since I think back in October, and we didn't meet that one time. So this is refreshing our memory. It says, please add a field for collection of PTE scores next to the TOEFL and IELTS in language proficiency demonstration test scores. Let's see, it says it's part of the state requirements, but I don't know, like the language testing requirements. Adding this field will save the 50+ Texas universities accepting PTE from having to manually collect and enter this information. Universities will be able to process an application as complete with this information. This will also save the student time in sending in required documents. So that was the request.
And as a follow-up, I would want to know, or we would want to know what application type should collect this information.
I'm completely unfamiliar with the Pearson test from the, point of view, from our point of view, we collect that so we kind of know where they are TSI wise, or, why would a student have this and why would we need to know, I guess?
Is there anyone, serving on the committee that currently uses Pearson's English?
We do. We accept it. We don't get their scores very often. And we would not accept self-reported scores. So I think probably this company sees that ApplyTexas has their competitors in the app, which would be TOEFL, IELTS, Duolingo, perhaps. And so they're just wanting equal representation. I don't know, do we collect the actual score from TOEFL on the application? Does a student enter their score? That I don't know, because we don't accept it.
I think that may depend on the application type.
Okay.
I think for some, we just collect the date taken.
Mm-hmm.
For some application types, we just collect the date taken, and maybe another we actually do collect the scores.
Okay.
I'd have to check.
Yeah, that may be right. So I believe that's really the impetus here, is equal representation on the app.
My follow-up would be, does this open the door where we would want to add more tests, the collecting of other test scores?
I certainly think that it would pave that way for sure. It sounds like we don't really have enough information. Angie, before I finish, I have a couple hands going up. So Angie, you want to start, and then we'll go to Dara and then Michelle.
All right, yeah, I was just going to speak to Michelle's comments too. We collect our scores directly from the testing entities. So my question would be, how many, if we have a question on ApplyTexas that's just showing the date taken, how many of us are actually using that question? Is it benefiting our schools with just when did they take the test? We don't use that.
We don't use it either at Texas Tech.
We don't use it either.
And then does anybody use a if they did put a self-reported test on the application, do you use that? So that would be my kind of like root question would be, do we need it at all, or are we using it through other methods? Sorry, David, I posted something crazy.
No, I'm just thinking this is definitely a follow-up discussion on some of the test information we're collecting, I think.
I'm jumping the line here, but it's on purpose. As I think back to Dr. Zach Taylor's report with Trellis and some of the competitors that he identified, didn't some of those competitors have it to where you could self-report tests? Is that perhaps where this is coming from? Okay, all right, thank you.
Dara.
Dara Newton, UTRGV. The part that I just was thinking about related to Pearson's more than anything, what helps support us in the processing of international applications is at least knowing the test that they attempted, because sometimes we are having to support students in what direction to go and send their scores to us because maybe we weren't where they looked originally. So knowing which test they took can be helpful, whether they went through Duolingo or IELTS or TOEFL, especially some of our international students that we support. And so if they do take Pearson's is not a predominant test necessarily for our institution, but in that, when you're supporting a group of students, it's nice to know already what they've done to help them figure out where they need to be to request that test score. So I don't necessarily need to know the date or their score, but it does help in some ways if you think about that support mechanism there. So I can see that if some students take it, at least marking that they've taken it could potentially support an institution, but I think it just depends on uses, and is predominantly international and would be then international graduate.
Thank you, Dara. Those comments are helpful. Luis?
No, I definitely agree. I think there's and maybe what David mentioned as far as a discussion about what we're asking. I think there's another thing too about from that report is how big is our application as far as the number of questions that we ask the student, in the sense of the length of the application, but then also I think what we're asking and why we're asking it and what we're doing with it, right? And that's not going to be the same across institutions, but I think if the same thing about the texting question, if we're asking this question, but we're not doing anything with it, that kind of, not necessarily everybody, but kind of what's the point on that versus the type of test versus the date of the test versus the actual reporting of the score of the test. So I think just being intentional about what the question is and what we're trying to gather. And I think the other thing too, I believe Michelle brought that up, the issue of if this entity or whatever would say, hey, well, you have these other two tests, why not? Why are you showing preference, or why are these tests listed and not these other tests? Mm-hmm. So I think we would also want to kind of consider that, and if there is some rationale, or either way, so that way it's not just, oh well, they got in first, or they were in when we were trying to have these questions, but now that we have too many questions, and just kind of what the consideration behind that would be.
I think those are very, very good points. So I believe at this point, if I understand correctly, really what we need is additional information. So would this be the same situation as the prior, where we would want to bring this person that's making the request so that they could respond to these questions, or would the technical team reach out? How would we like to move forward?
Excuse me. Go ahead, Claudia.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do want to add one more thing. From what I was hearing, and this requires a whole other discussion from you all, in looking at the questions that are asked and how they're used, if it sounds like you're not really using the other testing either, but there might be some discussion in changing the question to say, yes, they take these tests, or mark which test you take, to know. And like you said, Dara, the support systems that can be provided. That's a good question. And the reason why this is interesting to me is because I was on another committee and we went through an application to realize that the institutions have their own processes and didn't really utilize a lot of questions that were on an application because they were gathering this information through other methods. So it's important to know that, and that might be part of this strategic planning, kind of reviewing to cut down questions to begin with. As the FAFSA is being simplified, maybe the admission process can be simplified as well. But you brought up good points on how these questions are used. Do you use the TOEFL scores? How do you use that information at your campus to make admissions decisions? So I don't know if we want to go back to Pearson and say, come tell us more, if we're really not considering adding these and we want to reconsider how those questions are asked. So that's just one point I think we might want to do in moving forward, just a suggestion. So just kind of looking through some of those questions that you do not use or gather other information. We've realized that this application has become so complex because we've added more and more questions to capture data to make, for other areas. And now we're reevaluating what that looks like. So just throwing it out there that might be the next step.
Claudette, if we were to move forward with your recommendation or your suggestion, what would be the response back to Pearson? Would they just be notified that it's kind of on hold?
I would tell them that the committee is reevaluating the questions for testing, capturing the testing information because of the and I don't want to say a simplification like FAFSA, but because of the analysis that have been completed, that the committee is being strategic in looking at how you want to add questions and limit the amount of questions that students are taking. So we could ask them to come back for next fall, but that the committee wants to evaluate what these questions look like. But that's if the committee is choosing to do that. Right. If you're really looking at these questions and saying, we want to review these questions here, not just the testing, but others, then that's a whole process in itself. And then, considering other requests, and considering the analysis that have been done with the application in general. So there's a lot of moving pieces. So it's really up to you how you want to proceed. But we're hearing that adding more questions is not the right way to go. I'll put it in simplest terms. But if it's helping, because the individual, the requester who's saying this says it's going to help the student in not having to do multiple things, gathering, because what did she say? The justification is saying that it's accepting the PTA from having to manually collect and enter this information. That's a process that could help. So it's really outweighing what the benefit here would be. And I don't know if you're at the point that you can make the decision to add additional questions. So ultimately, sounds like you want to table this for more information, but do you want to, now that some other points have been brought up, do you want to consider some of these other questions that might be eliminated or, revised to be, as we were talking about this, to Dara's point, do you want to just simply say you've taken these tests? So those are some big questions, and I would definitely defer to you all to see how you want to handle next steps.
Thank you, Claudette. Angie?
Thank you. Angie at Sam Houston State. I think we're verging on like a bigger topic of really using like the data that we just found from the students, the counselors, the family members, because I think sometimes what we saw from the data is that we have a certain perception of how a student's feeling, and what they said is that they expected that. This is a big decision for them. They're going through the process. to them, the process was okay and linked. I'd have to go back through the very specifics of all of it. But I think sometimes we think, no more. But if it's going to help a student, we have to focus on the student experience. What do they need? If the question helps the student, then it's worth asking if it's going to help them go through the process easier. And so I think I do think we need to go back and look through with the data that we just got from the research from the strategic planning committee, and then looking at the questions of if our schools are actually using the questions or not to help the student and make that comparison. Yeah, I think that's a good way to go. But like with this specifically, if we need the test information and it helps us serve the student by knowing which test they took, I don't have a problem with adding the test that we're using. Like we don't have Duolingo on there, but we use Duolingo. So if we need to add it, then I don't want us to be limited by just thinking like in the matter of length or what's there. I think we just need to understand better as a team how we're actually using all of the application.
I agree. Mordecai?
What I was going to say was, Jamie, is I think this is a great opportunity just to hone in on the importance of us really following through on our strategic plan for ApplyTexas, because what in my opinion, what happens is that as we continue to receive requests, it causes us to pivot on the dime, and it may be or may not be in the strategic direction that's going to be in our best interest as we continue to formulate our strategic plan for ApplyTexas. And so if we talk about increased efficiencies and reducing the amount of time towards completion, or the more that we add, that implicates that, right? And so I totally understand that there's a process in place, and we want to hear the voice of our members, but I also think that this is just a great segue to say the significance of us really following through on our strategic plan, so we know the direction that we want to take ApplyTexas as members. That way we can have conversations at our respective institutions about what we would plan to do. Because if we say yes to this today, now we have to have a process conversation back at our institutions. And for every addition, if it causes us to have to go back and have process conversations. And so I think it's very significant and important for us to follow through on that strategic planning now more than ever.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. We certainly don't want to go away from the plan, right? And decrease efficiency, which there's a potential for that. So at this point, what's the next step? If do we all agree that that's what we want to move forward with? The next step of the strategic plan, reviewing this, see where this specific question, along with everything else, fits before we would bring a Pearson representative to a meeting. I see a lot of head shaking, so. Okay.
I'll go ahead and make the motion then, Jamie, that I think officially wouldn't even be a hold, it would be a table. Is that what that would be? But it would be tabling until, my recommendation would be to table until the strategic plan is presented to ApplyTexas. That would be my motion.
Thank you, Mordecai. Is there a second?
This is Sandra from Houston Community College. I second the motion.
Thank you, Indra. So members, by show of hands, if you are in favor of tabling this until we see the strategic plan, please put your hand up in front of your camera so we can see it and keep it held so that we can record that. Okay, we have that recorded. All right, thank you, and the motion passes. David, next item.
The final proposal we had carried over from last meeting was to expand the option of the parent information questions to all application types, but to not require it on application types other than the U.S. freshman. This was a request from Tarleton State University. The way the parent information currently works is that institutions opt in to whether they want that those questions to appear on their application, their US freshman application only, sorry. If they do appear, it is required that the applicant enter information for parent 1 and then can optionally add information for parent 2. This proposal, if I'm reading it correctly, would say, don't limit that just to the US freshman application. Have that option for other application types, but on those other application types, don't require that either parent be entered.
You muted, Jamie.
Thanks. Okay, so discussion for this specific request.
I would say we support this. We would like to have the parent information from the transfer students as well, or whatever language we use to say parent, guardian. So given that option of if we can, and I'm sorry, David, if you just explain this or not, if we can turn it, make it required or not, that I would like to have that option.
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts to it. One, would we want to expand it to other application types? And 2, if expanded to other application types, do we want it to behave in the same manner or as the proposal states, differently where it's not required? This one would take a little bit more work than the either of the other proposals we've reviewed so far.
So would we classify it as medium? At one point, we used to classify them in the 3 different categories. So
yes, and they've never been really well defined what exactly medium means, but yes, I would say this is a medium proposal.
I think one question I have, so would it be all of the other application types in addition to freshmen, or would we look at just specific applications like transfer, international? What about graduate? Would we want this, or it's just across all of them and optional, or whatever we decide? I mean, as a graduate student, I don't know that a graduate student is going to want to include their parental information. They might, but I certainly wouldn't be, I would not advocate for a graduate student that it would be required.
Agreed.
Luis, do you have a question?
Not a question, but I think, yeah, no, not a question. I think what David said was correct. I think it's just those, what are we really considering? So there's a difference. I think really it sounds like as it's presented, it's more of just expanding an option that's already possible, but not requiring it from the student or requiring for the institution to include it, right? So if for some reason a school wanted to say we do want to add private students, okay, well then you build it in, but you have the option at least to do that. If you decide not to, or if you do it, you don't have to make it require or the way that it's presented to the student that it defaults it anyway. So it sounds like as it is, it sounds just more expansion, more option, and then that institution or as that application is being kind of implemented or built, that those decisions will be made. So.
Thank you, Luis. Any other comments? Okay. Do we want to make a motion?
I have a question. Could we clarify what the motion is regarding? Which, because I think we said maybe not grad types. So can we clarify which app types we're talking about?
Well, I think that's a good point. That's a good point, Angie. So what are the thoughts? I mean, this is everybody's gone a bit quiet for this particular topic.
I would say we would, I mean, we use it for freshmen, we would use it for transfer. We would not use it for transient or returning, probably. Or at least we don't have a plan to right now. We wouldn't use it for grad. We would really use it for freshmen and transfer. I don't know how others would use it.
Angie, Texas Tech would be the same.
I think that's
Do
what I
you
was
use it
saying,
for
like, unless
international?
somebody has a different point, I don't see that one restricts the other, right? So if you open it to all and you don't use it, then it doesn't, right? It's not forcing grad students. I just don't know if we're just making it too specific or semantics, in the sense of like, do we delineate which application type, or if we don't feel that having it open, and if somebody doesn't decide to do it. So.
Okay, yeah, good point, Louis. I guess my question would then be to David, like, would you want to do it in phases? I don't know the scope of that work, if you're changing it for all app types or just a few. Does that change the scope of work?
Not significantly, just making the change itself. But once you start adding other app types, I don't think adding more than one or two additional app types significantly changes it. And if we only, another follow-up would be if we only limited it to freshmen and transfer, is that just US freshmen and US transfer, or would you want it on the international app types as well?
International as well.
So let me be clear, we would opt in for each app type, correct? Opt in or out, not just an
Yes.
opt-in in general.
Correct.
Okay.
It would be, it's like the extracurriculars or some of those other sections.
Okay.
It's per application type.
Okay, great, thanks.
And Jamie, I would motion that we approve this as stated. Or I guess not as stated, because she just asked for transfer. We would approve for all with the option.
Okay, so opt in for each application type, right, except for the US freshman where it would continue to be required. Is that the motion?
Sure. Yeah, I guess because in that way, if you want to require it, yes. And if you don't want to require it, then you don't.
Okay. Do we have a second? Oh, David, you're raising your hand, so.
Yeah, so currently you opt in to presenting that set of questions, and then just parent one is required. So I just want to make clear the proposal would be add the option to opt into that set of questions for all application types, but don't make parent one required for anything other than US freshmen? Or would you want it required for like international freshmen? I think I just want to be clear on what the need is.
I think the requester was asking, do you have the ability to opt in and still get to choose if it's required or not? You don't have that option.
Not currently.
Is it possible?
Yes. Yes, that's building new functionality. That's not expanding existing functionality, because that's additional legwork on the administrative side to record whether you want it to appear, and then on top of that, whether you would want it required, rather than just, do you want it to appear, and based on your wanting it to appear, it would either be required or not required.
So would that be, Jamie or Claudette, would that have to be two different motions since one is expanding functionality and one is new functionality? Or would it all be included in the same motion? Because I do think it's important to have the option for the parent for the transfer student.
I agree. Claudette?
I'm reading the request to see how I can best support the direction here. So it says a proposal to expand the option, and it said the explicit request is, I noticed the parent information can be turned on or off. What I'm hearing you say is that you do want this as an option, but the second, what would be the second? Because I was trying to capture in the notes and I was failing miserably. So if someone can say what the two parts would be, because it sounds like there's interest in including the information on the other application types as requested, but the language or the functionality is what's still up for kind of working through, because I was hearing you want to yes to expand, and then but specifics around
I think
the
we
on
would,
and off piece, the functionality is where I got lost.
yeah,
So
I think we would like to expand the current functionality to all app types. And I would propose, whatever everybody else would think as well, adding functionality, new functionality, to make it to where if you do opt in, you can choose whether it's required or not for the student. Right now, the expanding the functionality that's there, if you choose to turn it on, it's required. So I would propose that we expand what's there, but also add functionality to where if you do choose it, you can choose whether it's required or not for the student to complete. Did I say that right, David?
Yes. An add-on to that is we could expand it, but as a blanket for all other application types, it's not required, and not have the institution have to make that decision. Maybe the question is, if we expand it to other application types, would anyone want it required the way it is on the US freshman application type? Because there's no need to add that additional functionality if folks wouldn't want it required. I'll put my hand down.
yeah, I just need a clear, like, I get the expand to all types, but the part of required for some and not for all is where I'm having trouble writing that clearly for anyone to make a motion on moving that forward. And then this is, to me, a functionality across multiple apps. So there's no specific language that's needed in the application, or is there? Is there a question? There's no language here. It's just a function with a language that's already in an existing application. Okay,
Right.
So there's no language changes. There's just a functionality across the different applications. Is there a way to write this? I mean, you had this, Angie, and I'm again still trying to wrap my head around it. Yes, to expand to all other application types. The second part, add new functionality to allow what?
Well, David, David just brought up a good point, is does anybody want it required or not? Because if nobody wants it required, then he wouldn't have to add new functionality, and he could just let the
Correct.
question stand as not required.
Okay.
Correct. It would just be taking the proposal as written, I think, at that point.
Okay. That simplifies things a lot. All right. Thank you.
So I think going, oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Does anybody want it required on the other apps? I would vote for Sam Houston. No, we don't want it required.
Texas Tech would not either. Anyone else want to comment? Okay, so Angie, are we ready to make a motion?
Yes, I would like to motion that we accept the proposal as they've stated.
Wonderful. Do we have a second?
Sarah, I second.
Great. So again, by show of hands, if you are in favor, please raise your hand and keep it up until we've recorded that. All right. Is that all recorded? Claudette, are we good? Okay. So with that, the motion does pass. All right. David, any other comments about this section?
No, but one just occurred to me on the last one. I am assuming all application types means 2-year also.
I was assuming that as well. Okay, great.
Jamie, before you move on to the next agenda item, there was some comments that came through the email from our IHE, K through 12 partners, and I did want to have these questions asked and see what we can get for them. And I do want to say that there has been a great interest in from school districts to be a part of the committee recently, and I know that we're going to make recommendations that they can help support the different subcommittees that we have, like the Communication Subcommittee, maybe creating another subcommittee that might be more helpful in integrating more of the feedback as we're looking at strategic planning. But there has been, we sent out requests for nominations to be parts of the committee, for those that are leaving us and rolling off the committee. And there was a lot of interest from school districts. And we do have some active partners that have been on the committee or have shown up to the committee when in person and throughout this process. But we have some questions from Derek Hutchins, and he is from the Houston ISD. I just want to throw these out to you all, and mainly for the ApplyTexas staff. There's some interest in, well, there's some comments. I'll say the comments first. I think there was just some follow-up on the TREX discussion, just to give some clarity about what the TREX, how TREX, it says only high school registrars have access to TREX to send transcripts. College advisors and counselors can send transcripts via other platforms. So this tends to be the preference. To get more high schools to participate in the automated transcript transmission, high school staff will need to be more involved in the process, which is something that was determined, some of the other comments from the committee. He also mentioned that it's beneficial to high school students to keep the profile short and simple and allow colleges and universities to build out their own customized questions. Many students intending to only apply to a 2-year college face an overly complicated application when there's more in the profile. So not all students intend to apply to multiple colleges. That was a couple of comments. And then these questions are, I think, more directed toward the ApplyTexas tech team, which is, what is the communication plan and timeline for high schools to learn about the changes to the application? Will any high school counselors or advisors be allowed to alpha test the application? Will any training materials be available to high schools to train their staff on the application? And will there be an intentional line of communication for high school practitioners to share their experiences as the application goes live? So those were the questions that were sent.
Yes, we are updating our training materials, and I think Lorraine already sent you the first round of the updated counselor specific training materials, Claudette. And then I think I responded to you a couple weeks ago. We are interested in involving counselors in the same type of alpha testing on a little different timeline. And in particular, we're interested in Houston ISD because that district is so large. So yes,
can you share the timeline and how they might connect?
Sure, it would be around the 1st of June. And I've got Derek's name already written down, and I think there's one other district that's expressed interest, and we're interested in reaching out to them and getting their feedback.
And the training materials, I know that that's been updated. I think I shared with Derek too that training materials have been done. I think just making them available in ApplyTexas. When will that happen?
Probably around the same time that we wouldn't want to put them on the old existing platform because the training materials deal with a new platform. So at the same time we open up that alpha testing platform to those testers, we would make those training materials available to them.
So it'd be available 1st of June then. Okay. I think you answered the questions. Let's see, I'm double checking. Training materials, communication. This is something we're definitely working on, the communication plan, to get more feedback. I mean, we're talking about communication about changes, so it's one directional at this time, but I do like the idea of a feedback loop that would require some more communication offline to see how we can, you guys can further engage, or the K through 12 can further engage in providing feedback on their experiences with the new application. David, we can talk more about that offline and engage Derek in those conversations as well. Let me see, anything else? Yeah. Oh, and we will be getting to more information in the next agenda item about how we're going to share information of the rollout. So that'll be coming shortly. Jamie, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I want to take a moment and acknowledge Derek Hutchinson from Houston ISD and say thank you for sending those questions and comments, because it's extremely helpful when we're having a discussion for those of you that are watching to send in your comments to help inform decision making. So thank you, Derek, for doing that. Does anybody want to take a break? And I might be asking for personal reasons, but or biased here, but would anybody like to take maybe a 10-minute break, and then we'll start back at 10:34? Would that work? Okay, so we will take a break and we will be back online at 10:34. Thank you.
Hey, Jamie, we essentially have items 8 and 9 left, correct?
Yes, sir. That's all. We're moving through this fairly quickly this morning.
I think so.
Want to welcome everybody back. So if you're back, if you'll please turn on your camera so we can get started with item number 8. We'll wait just a minute or so. We'll wait for Claudette to join us, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Here she goes.
All right. Okay, so we are going to start with item number 8 on our agenda. It's discussion regarding the ApplyTexas Speedy EDI meeting. So as many of you know, the ApplyTexas Speedy EDI meeting has been combined with the TACRO summer meeting for several years now. And that decision was made back when the new cycle application opened up on August 1st. That meeting has occurred in July. But now that we've moved the new application cycle opening to July 1st, does it make sense for us to continue to partner with TACRO and hold those meetings together when that meeting will continue to occur with TACRO in July, which is after the new cycle application opens? I know for Texas Tech, our institution, it sometimes creates some challenges when we have questions or we're waiting for things. We want to see the ApplyTexas Speedy EDI meeting. We want to be able to attend that, have conversation before we roll out. And I've heard from a few other institutions as well. So I wanted to propose to this group that looking at separating those two meetings. So ApplyTexas EDI, I would propose that we host that meeting in June, like we did before it was combined with TACRO. And we would no longer partner with the TACRO organization moving forward. So I've opened that up for discussion.
This is Rebecca, UTA. Yes. Yes and yes. Go back to June. Don't partner with TACRO.
Thank you, Rebecca. Angie, I saw you
Jamie?
give it.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I was just going to say, I agree. It's just time sensitive now with everything, how things changes, that we need to be ahead of the curve to be able to support our students as the application opens.
Thank you both. Angie, I saw you gave a thumbs up as well. I see some other folks shaking their head. We don't need to vote on this because it's not legislated that we have to partner together. But I think it would be helpful if there is anyone that opposes this or thinks that there's a reason we should stay together, if they would hold their hand up or comment before we make a decision. Okay, I don't see any comments or any opposition to moving forward. So effective summer 2021, the ApplyTexas Speedy EDI meetings will go back to June and no longer partner with TACRO. That's the first part of this discussion. The second part is talking about the summer meeting for June. And I want to talk through that. I would propose that we host a virtual meeting similar to last year. I think there's, probably going to be several questions revolving around the implementation of AWS. David, I think you and Graham did a great job last year leading that virtual meeting. And so I would open it up for discussion, but that would be my proposal for this summer. You all got so quiet. All right, no comments. Oh,
well, I just want to clarify. So what we're hearing for the discussion is that you're proposing a similar summer meeting virtually, that the ApplyTexas team will provide the updates and what the new sections would be. Considering that they did two different, one for the administrative suite and one for the counselor suite, is the expectation of the ApplyTexas team to do a similar format, maybe just some further discussion so the ApplyTexas team knows what the expectation would be? And David, what you all are able to do as well, just kind of having that discussion.
Yeah, I would want to know if we want a similar two different bodies, sort of one targeted at administrators and one targeted at counselors. And then I would suggest opening it up. Are there other? It seemed like part of the value that we used to have in the in-person meetings was everyone getting together and discussing, other topics. And maybe that's an opportunity here too, like some of the questions that have been brought up today about common custom questions and how those become just questions on the app rather than institution set up custom questions and that type of thing, and questions that are no longer needed, like the test score stuff. If that's accurate, I think it would be good to. So I would just suggest, do you want the exact same thing as last year? Do you want other sessions where you can talk about other topics like that, or what?
David, I think that's a really good point. I can say that I attended both, the one that was for the higher ed side and the one for the high school counselors, and the content seemed to be very, very similar, and not a lot of differences. So I would recommend that we combine both groups, and then I can tell you for the TACRO summer meeting, as we're working through that right now, it's going to be, and we're actually making changes to the TACRO summer meeting as well. In the past, it's been the 4-year institutions would meet, the 2-year institutions would meet separately, but this year we're combining both of those because of the advantages of both groups visiting together. And part of our day-long meeting will also, or it's actually occurring over 2 days, part of that will also include breakout sessions for specific discussions led by different groups. So I don't know if there would be any opportunity for that. I definitely think that users would be interested to hear more about the strategic plan, what's been conducted, where we're at, and kind of what the timeline is, a bit of what we discussed here already, but really the direction. I also think the piece that Claudette brought up about really encouraging and inviting participation from the K-12 community, I think that they would want to hear that. That's my personal thought anyway.
I think there is more value this year in having separate groups for administrators and counselors because there's going to be 2 new portals targeted at those. That's just my thought. So I don't know.
Could there be I can tell you as an administrator, I want to be able to see the counselor portal as well.
Okay.
And I think that the counselors want to be some of them want to see what we're doing right on the administrative. So on the administrator side, is there a possibility of doing a joint session, right? That's a great overview, showing both of those, and then maybe having either a separate portion where we have a breakout session and maybe it's even discussion based perhaps. It's hard, right? If we have, I don't know how many users we'll have or attendees we'll have, but it's hard in a large group. But maybe if we were to break out into sessions, I don't know what others think about that. And David, if that's something that technically we can pull off, but.
Yeah, I think the only thing we ran into last year was the size of the groups. We had to do something special last minute to get a large enough Zoom license, I think. So I would just want to be better prepared for the total number that we were expecting. If that's even possible, I don't know.
We didn't register last year, right? It was just here, it's available, show up if you want kind of thing. Or was there a register? I don't remember. Pardon me.
I think there was, I want to say there was registration, but that the link got passed around. There were definitely some anonymous comments that didn't need to come through.
Okay. Well, to let you know, I really do like the recommendation. I agree with your suggestion, Jamie and David, to have one overview to give a good overview of the entire system as it is currently, and then to separate into 2 different breakouts with one administrative strand and then one counselor suite strand, so it identifies both populations. I really do think during those sessions we have time for feedback and engagement to hear what more improvements. I think also not only an overview of the rollout and changes, but I love the idea of presenting this committee's strategic plan and, like you said, what we've done, what's been done over the past couple of years, as well as where we are now and what direction the committee and the ApplyTexas team is moving. I think that's a really good plan, solid. I will go ahead and volunteer our staff, our agency, to host. We have, I'm reading from my staff, Lisa Pies. She's actually she's in the background for those of you that don't know, but she is instrumental in running the meeting and is doing all the slides. So I always appreciate her, and my other colleague, Deanna Foos, part of our team. We have a 300 small room and 1,000 large rooms, so we can accommodate with some things that we put some dedicated funds to having the Zoom, and we can separate them into business to do different groups and have engaging discussions. Depending on how many people register, we might be able to break them up into smaller groups and facilitate. It would help to know who's interested in helping us with that planning over the summer, because we would probably need some, just depending on how many registrants we get, being able to facilitate conversations for both strands. And, we could also troubleshoot if it's a large amount of people that are interested. We could have 2 separate days, but right now I would envision what you said, Jamie, having 1 day overview, strategic planning overview, and then having the 2 strands meet into 2 different breakout groups. And we could actually make them into multiple groups if it becomes more manageable that way. But we would definitely need some additional support in managing that work over the summer. So that's what we can offer as far as our coordinating board staff.
Thank you, Claudette. Kevin, you have your hand raised?
Yes, I was just going to mention that the possibility of, Zoom fatigue with long meetings. So I was wondering, or just saying, what is the possibility of maybe doing a summer series where you're doing 5 or 6 different shorter things where you can sort of have these discussions, maybe rather than doing a long day, but, definitely with Claudette's suggestion, maybe, do it all at once might be more feasible, but also some people are choosing to do some of the smaller sessions, and that might be a route where we can touch different topics, but yet still not fatigue from being on, Zoom too long. Just a suggestion.
Kevin, I think that's a really good point about Zoom fatigue. I think we're all have experienced that. One challenge I think we have is that, we really only have the month of June, and probably the earlier the better, I would think, for most, since we're implementing AWS. So I would be a bit worried about a summer series at this point, just because we're short on time this year. I think if we're ever in the situation of doing virtual meetings in the future, maybe that's a great idea, but I would be concerned about making sure we were able to meet in a timely manner before the application opens on July 1st. But that's just my thought.
Well, and a happy medium might be, to your point, Kevin, that we decide to do the overview, strategic plan, have those different, again, it's more one-way directional. Here's all the information. And then at a separate time, do the more engagement, feedback loops that we want once it's all rolled out. And that can be done in a different timeline. So that might be a way to address having, meeting the fatigue, but also having, engagement, opportunities for engagement, like David was mentioning. So it's up to you all. Again, we have to think about your time, the time it takes to integrate the things that need to be happening pretty quickly, and then having those opportunities for feedback as well. Chantel, I see your hand raised.
Yes, I just wanted Claudette to know that I would love to help organize and assist in any way that I can with the summer meetings.
Thank you, Chantel.
Claudette, obviously, I will be available to help in any way I can.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie.
Even if you're rolling off, doesn't mean you can't help. Just putting a call out there.
And we might be getting, like I said, we have some interest from our K through 12 partners that are really interested in helping support this work too. So we could reach out to them as well. But we just need some direction, mainly for the technical team and for our staff to know the timelines what your expectations are in making sure that we meet your timelines for the institution, but also offering those other opportunities for engagement and feedback.
Claudette, would it be helpful, or is this too early to look at some dates on the calendar, or at least a week? That might be a good week to target, especially for that the overview for the larger groups.
I think since the group's here and we have some dedicated time to look at the calendars, if you're able to now. If you want to postpone that, it's just what the consensus of the committee is. I think it's good to look at it now since you all are here, and we have until 12:30, so your calendars are blocked.
All right. How about if we start with this? Maybe we go by week. Maybe that'd be the easiest thing to do. I think the first full week of June is June 7th. Are there, based upon what's going on at your institutions, and also keeping in mind, we want to keep in mind our K through 12 partners and what their calendars tend to look like at that time. Is that a week that is good, not good? I can tell you, for me, I am not available. Not that I need to be there, but the first couple of days I won't be available that week. But other than that,
I'd like to say, if Derek is on and can email me directly, let me know if the first week in June works, or even the second week in June works for you. We would prepare to record the overview in session. That's why the engagement piece might happen further along, maybe starting in the summer or August. We just need to discuss that further, but the overview about the applications. And I think if I'm remembering correctly, I want to say that we had the overviews in late June. Was it June 24th, around that time? I don't know the specific date, but I want to say and we did get a good response. I mean, we had people on for both the administrative suite overview as well as the counselor suite overview, and those were both recorded. Do you recall? I think Jamie or Rebecca, David, anyone?
going back to my calendar. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not on my calendar, I don't think, but I thought it was like middle, like 19th, somewhere
I
in
knew it
there.
was somewhere mid to late June.
Mhm.
Dara, I see your hand raised.
Just thinking through that maybe if we could do the end of the first week of June, and thinking about school districts. So granted, I don't know every school district across Texas, but in some of the regions, you're seeing a May end date, and then you're seeing that middle week, somewhere around the 17th, 18th of June as end dates for other school districts. And so they won't be in that 9, 10, 11 window. They aren't in that very last minute week of school that leads them into their last few days. Maybe that fits on the high school side. I realize that hopefully somebody from high school is out there, but thinking through, so districts ending right around that Memorial Day versus other districts with the extended schedule that don't end until right around 17, 18 in June. So maybe the week prior to their last week of school is a little more beneficial, or then it really does go to be later in June if we wait for our high schools, if we're waiting for them to actually complete school.
Dara, good point. Last year, I know we hosted one session on June 17th. I also would ask, oh, sorry, wasn't sure.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would also ask David and Graham, what timeline is good for you all, knowing that first presentation the bulk of that work will be on you to develop that presentation.
Sorry, I'm looking at my calendar too.
While David's doing that, I know I'm getting lots of texts and emails coming in. So it looks like the middle of June probably may not work for anywhere between the 11th of June to the 18th is probably not going to work for some people that have reached out to me right now. And I do want to say that our agency is hosting a P16 conference, which our staff is going to be doing a lot of prep for on June 24th. That's why that date sounded familiar to me and I threw it out there. But so we will be doing that as well. So I would recommend doing it the first week of June, probably the latter part, if possible, maybe if that works for people. Because Derek did respond and said that it would probably be tough for some school districts because they're going through graduations, but as long as there's recordings there, that would be great. So we intend to record it. So it makes more sense to do the overview, the strategic planning piece more as a one-directional informational sessions to be recorded, and then at a later date do more feedback and engagement loops. So that would be, I think, a good idea. Dara, do you still have your hand up or another comment?
Well, and I think with that thought, then really picking a date that works for the technical team and the coordinating board probably makes the most sense. I would also recommend that, again, it's as early as possible so that people can watch it whenever they want throughout the month, depending upon what their scope of work looks like and their timeline.
David,
would-
does, okay.
I would propose June 7, 8, or 9 if that's possible.
I think 8 or 9 works, or 9th probably works the best for our staff. Does June 9th work for everyone else?
And then Claudette, David, once the breakout sessions and the additional sessions, that'll be decided, the date on that will be decided at a later time, or did we want to have discussion around that now? What?
So I was thinking, and when we talk about overview, like here are all the changes that are happening to all sections, like David's provided to the committee and to ESEC. That's a good high level overview. Then also providing the strategic plan or the direction. I would probably need to work with Miguel and others just to make sure we have that script done pretty solidly, and then be able to share that with as an overview. Again, more informational, recorded, and then we'll plan for the other feedback pieces at a later date. So that's what I would think. So it'd probably be maybe an hour and a half of time, I'm guessing. And we can think through that a little bit more, as long as we have a date that's pretty solid and the information that we want to cover. Is there anything else as far as the committee is concerned that you want to present to the entire, because we're taking the opportunity to be more transparent about what the committee's doing, about what the new application. This is our big opportunity to showcase the new application, as well as say, here are the efforts we've made. This is what we're doing and where we're going. That's what I envisioned this specific date would be. Luis?
Ms. Franco, just to clarify, I'm sorry if I missed it, is so for this June 9th, I think was the proposed, that middle of the week. What's the expectation on us? Is it to attend, to do something, or is it just kind of something that's be recorded from a technical, just from a standpoint of availability and quorum and things like that? Because I think Jamie mentioned that she wouldn't be available. I'm not available on that particular date. But if we're not required to be there, then that's fine. I just want to make sure the expectation.
I'll answer from my point of view, and anyone else that's been involved in previous TACRO summer meeting work. In the past, this was an opportunity for the committee to meet in person. When we did meet in person with TACRO, we took the opportunity to kind of just discuss informally information about what's going on, what we're hearing from the different sessions. Since this is a virtual meeting, it's really just a volunteer basis on whether or not you can help support this work or just listen in. Really, it would be more the tech team providing their overview, maybe Miguel or a representative of the committee presenting the strategic plan. We would just kind of coordinate that at that point, but it's really just that at this point for the committee. And you're welcome. So the invitation would go out to anyone. It'll go out to the committee as well. You're welcome to join in. And at a later time, we'd probably want you to be more active if we're listening for feedback in future sessions. And that would be to be determined. because we want to make sure that we have the right people on the calls, like our K through 12 partners. And since the summer doesn't really work out for them as well, and we'll probably meet with Derek or other K through 12 partners to figure out what would be the best timeline for that. But that's more to be determined. And that's where we would see the committee could be more helpful at that point. But for this June 9th meeting, my understanding is just overview of what's happening, consulting with some of our co-chairs and Miguel to kind of go over how we want to present the information to the stakeholders. Does anyone else have any information? That's kind of what I see, and I think would be a good strategy.
Claudette, I agree with you completely. I think that's the best strategy for us moving forward and getting this information out as quickly as possible. Okay, any more discussion revolved around the summer meeting? And Claudette, I just want to confirm. So June 9th is the date we're going to, so we can put that on add that to our calendar. Okay.
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item number 9, transition of leadership. And this is a bit different than what we've done in years past. Usually we wait until the first meeting, usually in September, before we talk about, or before we elect, the new chair that has become available. But Mordecai had a really great idea of maybe we should kind of back that up so that that person, whoever is elected, we can discuss it now, we can elect someone, and then over the summer, they can receive orientation from the coordinating board through Claudette and her team. They can also work with the other co-chair that's remaining, and also receive some mentorship from the outgoing co-chair. So we've decided to add this to the agenda and move it up a bit. And so anyone that is currently serving on the committee that is a 2-year representative is open up to be, or is available to be nominated. And please feel free to nominate yourself if you're interested. And so at this, if we have any questions, this would be the time to ask. And if not, then we'll call for nominations. And I'd like to recommend Dr. Chantel Blake. I hope you're willing to accept.
I second the nomination.
Thank you.
Any other nominations? Okay. Well, with that, then let's take a vote. Dr. Chantel Blake has been nominated for the 2-year committee co-chair. Do I have a motion to accept Dr. Blake as the 2-year committee co-chair?
So moved. Luis.
Thank you, Luis. That was Michelle. Okay. Thank you. So again, if you are in favor and want to vote aye, please raise your hand. Don't cover your face, and make sure we record that. Claudette, do we have that recorded?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And with that, the motion passes that Dr. Chantel Blake is our new 2-year representative co-chair. So we're excited. I'm excited to work with you, Dr. Blake. So I look forward to it. And I think Dr. Brownlee left some big shoes to fill, but I know that you're going to do a great job. So thank you so much. Anything you want to say at this time?
I just want to thank everyone for the nomination and the confidence, and I will do my absolute best, and I'm looking forward to that mentoring.
I'll jump in there, Jamie, and just say that Dr. Blake will be in touch, and we'll make sure you have what you need. Congratulations to you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Blake. You get to work with our staff and our co-chairs, so we're excited to have you aboard. Thank you for accepting the nomination.
Well, with that, unless there's any other business, we can move to agenda item number 10, adjournment, which I'm sure you're all excited about. So do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Ms. Jamie, I will make my final motion to this body of great colleagues that we adjourn this meeting.
Thank you.
Sorry. I have one announcement. I forgot. I thought I would say it. We do have, before you adjourn, just letting you know, we did submit nomination forms yesterday out to your presidents and chancellors to accept nominations to serve on the committee. So please be on the lookout. Make sure you recommend others. We'll send it out via email to you also if you want to recommend others. Those that are rolling off the committee, you can send to your institutional departments or whoever does the approvals for your nominations, and we'll get that to you. But the nominations are due May 21st. So thank you, Deanna, for reminding me, and I apologize for interrupting the adjournment.
That's a good reason, Claudette. All right, so I'll make my motion again, and I'll add that I'll be highly offended if anyone flies into Denver and doesn't come by and see me at Community College of Aurora. I'll take personal offense to it. But I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn the meeting at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Brownlee. Do we have a second?
I'll second that. Angie, St. Houston.
Thank you, Angie. And so with that, raise your hand if you're in favor of adjournment of this meeting at 11:10 on May 12th. Okay. Well, with that, then we are adjourned. Thank you all for your participation.
Thank you, Jane.